The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. Psalms chapter 5 verse 5. In this verse, David continues to reflect on the nature of God, emphasizing his righteous judgment and his disdain for sin. He declares that the foolish will not stand in God's presence and that God hates all who engage in iniquity. This statement serves to reinforce the idea that God cannot tolerate sin and that those who live in foolishness and wickedness are not able to endure in his sight. David's words remind us of the severity of God's judgment against evil and the necessity of aligning ourselves with his standards of righteousness. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. David begins by highlighting the fate of the foolish. The foolish in this context refers to those who live in disregard of God's wisdom, acting in ways that are morally and spiritually ignorant. The term suggests people who reject the guidance of God and choose to live in sin. By stating that they shall not stand, David emphasizes that such individuals cannot endure or remain in God's presence. They are not able to stand before God because their lives are not founded on wisdom or righteousness, which are essential to having fellowship with Him. This statement calls us to reflect on our own lives and the need for wisdom and humility before God, knowing that the foolishness of sin has no place in His presence. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. In the second part of the verse, David expresses a strong truth about God. He hates those who work iniquity, or engage in sin and wrongdoing. The word hatest signifies a profound and active opposition to sin and those who perpetuate it. It is not simply a passive disapproval, but a deep, inherent aversion to evil. God does not merely dislike sin, He hates it with a perfect and holy hatred. This reflects God's absolute purity and His intolerance of all that is corrupt and evil. David's words remind us that iniquity is not just an act but a rebellion against God's righteousness, and God's holiness demands that evil be opposed and eradicated. Conclusion. Psalms 5:5 reinforces the theme of God's holiness and His righteous judgment. It serves as a sobering reminder that sin, foolishness, and iniquity are incompatible with God's nature, and that those who persist in evil will not stand before Him. David challenges us to examine our own lives, ensuring that we are not living in foolishness or sin, but striving to walk in wisdom and righteousness. This verse urges us to align ourselves with God's holiness, knowing that He cannot and will not tolerate evil. It calls us to forsake the ways of iniquity and pursue lives that are pleasing to the God who is both just and holy.